Welcome to Whatif tutorials. In this tutorial I'll be looking at activity costing of subcontract and other costs. First we'll be looking at cost drivers. These are the variables which may drive the incidence or the quantity of subcontracts and or other cost items. We'll then look at adding subcontract costs to an activity. Then we'll look at other costs to add to an activity. And lastly, we'll be looking at the analysis of subcontract and other costs across activities within a project. First, click Project to take us to the project master file where there is this project. To get to the costing, click Activity Costing, and here we see all the activities for this project listed, starting with the total costs, followed by headers, header activities, and then detail activities within headers, details activities within headers, and so on. We'll be looking at subcontract and other costs. But first of all, we must have a look at cost drivers. Cost drivers for each activity have to be defined. When you create an activity, a detail activity that is, the system automatically creates a default driver called job with a quantity of 1. This covers those cases where there is no apparent driver responsible for driving the cost of a subcontract operation or another cost operation. However, there will be other drivers that you need to create. So let's create one now. Select a driver. Now these are the master drivers which have to be created in the master files, although you can create a new master driver here on the top by clicking that. So we'll just add in another driver called Windows, and we must enter the quantity of windows for this activity. So now we've created a third driver for this particular activity. Close that. Now let's go to subcontract and other costs. Now this screen shows both subcontract and other. The subcontractor sub and the other costs are other. And over here we have the two columns adding down to the total of subcontract costs and the total of other costs for this activity. So let's add a subcontract item. First thing you need to do is to select a supplier of the item, and if necessary you can add a new supplier here. You can filter suppliers by type in order to locate the supplier you want. And having selected the supplier, click Use. Next we select the subcontract classification. So subcontracts are classified into various classifications for ease of selection and use and analysis. So we will select this one here. This is cement contracts. Next we have to add the actual subcontract operation. Now these are of two types. There's a standard or non-standard. If there's a standard operation for this particular class, we can look and say yes, we found it. So it's saying here that this operation has a driver that's not included in our drivers. So we now say yes, and we can add that driver now. So we'll say add quantity of 5. So we've now added an additional driver on the trot because this particular standard operation which we selected, XPISTD, that needed this driver. So we've defined the driver quantity required. Next we enter in the usage quantity per driver unit, and it defaults to 1, and we have a repeat usage defaults to 1. So we end up then with the total quantity required and the total cost. In this case, $12. So that then brings us to a long description for the subcontract and instructions for this particular operation, subcontract operation. Okay, so we've now added a subcontract operation to our list, and it's now appearing in that column there. Now we can do the same thing for adding other costs. It's the same routine. We add, select the supplier, we select the particular classification, and once again, if there's standard operations we can see them, but there's none, so this will be a non-standard operation. At the supplier, we simply enter the cost per unit, and if say it's just a total cost of $5,000, then everything else goes to 1. You can see here that it's defaulted to the job driver code. Once again, if it really relates to bins, for example, we could bring that in, and that'll give us a quantity in total of 5. That is 5 times the cost per unit, gives you 25,000. Okay, and then finally we have the timeline for that operation. It defaults to the activity timeline, but you can change it here. And then we enter the long description and the instructions. And that's that. So now we've added an other cost to our list of subcontract and other costs to give us a total there. Okay, so that is how we add subcontract and other costs. Okay, before we finish, I would like to draw your attention to the analysis. Click Project Analysis, Subcontract Other. Here we see all of the operations across the entire project. So this is saying that we've got a total in subcontract of 11,000, a total in other costs of 28,000, which is spread across the activities, as you can see here. We've got other costs in that particular single activity there, and then we've got 2 more incidences of these 2 here, 2 activities for the subcontract. But the analysis, which we're just in, allows us to select various subcontract and either subcontract. We can get that, just the total, well, we know that anyway. We can go by classification, other. So we can select what criteria we want. We can select for a header activity, header 2, okay. So they're all in header 2. So we select activity, detail activity, activity 3, and so on. So we can select stuff, and then we can do a series of reports. Now these reports focus on the operations by date, accumulated operations by date. So this has bearing on the timing of the incurrence of costs over the timeline of the activity. So that is the analysis of subcontract and other costs, and that concludes this tutorial.